Hi, I'm DraftKings analyst Geoff Ulrich, and this is the DKTV lineup review for Week 15 of the NFL season. If you're new to the lineup review, we're going to look at some Week 15 winners lineups from DraftKings big tournaments from last week. And we're also going to break down these lineups and see what strategies and ideas we can take from them to help us build better lineups in the future. So the first lineup we're going to look at this week is the lineup from the big Millionaire Maker winners tournament. Player by the name of Flanders 002. A couple interesting points about this lineup right off the bat. He used Antonio Brown versus the Denver Broncos, which was a very against the grain play. Brown was only about 6% owned. Really worked out well for him this week though. Secondly, he used a bare bones min-priced wide receiver in Dontrell Inman. That play also worked out well. Inman ended up getting 10 points, which is really good for his price. And he also used a Cam Newton-Ted Ginn combo, which is very similar price point-wise to the Russell Wilson-Doug Baldwin combo we've seen the last couple weeks, which has been really successful. So I thought that was really interesting as well. What I liked about his lineup from a strategic point, well, the first thing is he used a stars and scrub approach to build his lineup. He used plenty of low-priced value picks. He used Dontrell Inman, who's only $3,000. He used Danny Woodhead, and he used Ted Ginn. We're both below $5,000 in price. This allowed him to roster a lot of big-name wide receivers like Antonio Brown and Allen Robinson, and also allowed him to get Cam Newton in there too, who's pretty expensive this week. Min-priced or near min-priced players, they can be really powerful if they have big days. They also offer you a ton of flexibility because it means you can fit in those big-name players. Dontrell Inman, he was only $3K, but he still got to 10 points. That's really good for his price point. You know, we're aiming for 3 times at least most weeks. And then Ted Ginn, as the #1 wide receiver in Carolina, he had a great day. He was the real star of this lineup in my opinion, putting up 26.5 fantasy points at only 4,600. As the #1 wide receiver in Carolina, that's almost 6 times his salary. That's a really good price. That's a really good fantasy total as well, I should say. If you're using this play in the future, look for those cheap players who are maybe getting a bump in workload due to injuries, like Inman was kind of this week, or look for those players who are just getting underpriced, sort of like a Ted Ginn. Next week, if you're looking to use this play, think about using Stephon Diggs. He's playing really well, really explosive player, getting good targets. He's only 4,400. I really like that play. Also think about maybe whoever's starting for the Buffalo Bills. They're going to be in a good spot too. Buffalo Bills at running back, I should say. They're going to be in a good spot too. So the second strategic point I really like about this lineup, he used some good pass-catching running backs. He used Danny Woodhead and he used David Johnson. These pass-catching running backs, they can accumulate points a lot faster because of the PPR factor. Whenever they catch a pass, they're getting a point, and they're also going to be more involved in the pass game near the red zone, which means they're going to have more of a chance of a touchdown. David Johnson, Danny Woodhead, both great pass catchers, both real mismatches for opposing defenses. Johnson's a former wide receiver in college. He's getting a tremendous workload right now, tons of catches. He's been playing great since he started. Great matchup versus the Eagles this week as well. Really been horrible against the run. Danny Woodhead playing against a Miami team who just can't stop the pass lately. Very talented pass-catching running back too. This is the second time he's cracked 30 points on DraftKings this year. Next week, if you're looking to employ this play, think about James White from the Patriots, who's been getting a ton of passing targets each week, going against a Jets defense who hasn't been great against the pass lately. The third thing I really like about this lineup, he went cheap at defense and he targeted a weak quarterback with his defense. The Houston Texans versus Matt Hasselbeck. This is kind of an old lesson, but it keeps showing up in these winning lineups, so it's something really important. These cheap defenses can still score well. You don't necessarily have to pay up to get a good score at defense every week, and there's not a huge spread in scoring either. The Texans have a good pass rush. They're playing an ailing Matt Hasselbeck. He was kind of banged up, so the Colts offense wasn't in a good spot here to score a ton of points. If you're looking to use cheap Ds in the future, look for teams with good pass rushes, possibly playing at home, and definitely target those weak quarterbacks. Next week, I really like the Detroit Lions versus the San Francisco 49ers, whose offense hasn't been very good lately. So that's great work on the Millie Maker lineup. Now let's look at the first stage winner of the big DraftKings Live Final FFWC from this past weekend. A player by the name of Condia. He won the first stage, and now he's going to be in first place playing with the final 10 who are going to get to play down on January 16th and 17th in the divisional playoffs. So Condia also used a cheap defense in his team as well. He actually targeted the Indianapolis Colts, who are even cheaper than the Houston Texans, only about 2K in price. The Colts, they only scored 8 points, but for that price, he was able to use those savings and pay up elsewhere. And it's really interesting to see such a good player use this strategy and employ it well. The other thing about his lineup that I really like, he used a cheap value play at quarterback, but he targeted a mobile quarterback, Tyrod Taylor. Taylor's been a little bit inconsistent this year, but he's recorded 5 games of 24 fantasy points or more, and he's averaging over 50 yards rushing in his last 4 games. Those points add up big and really quickly. We've touched on how good these mobile quarterbacks are for big tournaments in the past. 3 of the last 4 winners of the Millionaire Maker have actually used Cam Newton or Russell Wilson. They're great tournament targets. And then the last thing about his lineup, he also used some PPR running backs. He used Danny Woodhead, who we also already talked about, but he also used Devonta Freeman. He scores a lot through PPR. He was a little bit expensive this week, but he gets targeted so much in the passing game by the Falcons. He's basically their number 2 receiver, and he had a good matchup against Jacksonville, who's been giving it up a lot of receptions to running backs this year. So I really like that play. So some key takeaways from this week, guys. Don't be afraid to go with that stars and scrubs approach, especially if you can identify some good value plays for the week, just like the winner did this week with Ted Ginn and Dontrell Inman. Also, don't be afraid to target those PPR running backs. They accumulate points really quickly, they're really good for tournaments, and they're just safer plays really in general. And then lastly, those cheap defenses, it's a great way to get savings in your lineup. Target those weak QBs with cheap defenses. You can spend up elsewhere. Just in closing, guys, my name's Geoff Ulrich. You can find me on Twitter as @TheFantasyGrind. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to DKTV after you watch this video. Good luck in Week 16, and we'll talk to you again next week.